Snow has a way of hiding the truth. It softens broken fences, buries forgotten roads, and makes abandoned places look almost peaceful. From a distance, winter can convince you that the world is clean again, untouched by grief or regret. But snow never erases anything. It only covers what is waiting underneath. Every December, when the first flakes begin drifting across the rooftops of whatever city I happen to be living in, people ask me the same question. Why don't you ever spend Christmas with your family? I always smile politely. I tell them my grandfather's cabin is too far away, that the mountain roads become impossible after the first heavy storm, that nobody lives there anymore. Those answers are easier. The truth is far more difficult to explain. The road has never been the problem. It is what waits at the end of it. My grandfather died 17 winters ago. The doctors called it heart failure. The villagers nodded, quietly attended the funeral, and returned to their ordinary lives. To everyone else, he was simply another old man who had spent too many lonely years in a wooden cabin surrounded by endless pine forests. To me, he was the only person who ever made that lonely place feel like home. When I was a child, every winter holiday meant driving north with my parents for nearly 6 hours. The motorway would slowly disappear behind us, replaced by narrow country roads lined with frozen rivers and ancient forests that seemed older than memory itself. The closer we came to the mountains, the quieter the world became. Villages grew smaller, streetlights became rarer. Eventually there was nothing but towering spruce trees, endless snowfields, and a single winding road climbing toward the peaks. Nestled among those mountains was the village of Alder Ridge. Barely 40 families lived there. Most of the houses were built from dark timber that had weathered generations of brutal winters. Smoke curled lazily from stone chimneys, church bells echoed across the valley every Sunday morning, and everyone knew each other by name. Life moved differently there. Slower, quieter, as though time itself hesitated before entering the valley. Grandfather's cabin stood another 5 kilometers beyond the village, completely alone at the edge of the forest. There were no neighbors, no mobile signal, no passing traffic after sunset. Only snow, trees, and silence. As a child, I loved that silence. It felt magical. The fireplace always crackled warmly. Grandfather brewed tea with herbs he gathered himself during summer. Every evening he would sit in the old leather chair beside the window reading weathered books while snow drifted softly outside. Sometimes we played chess until midnight. Sometimes we simply listened to the wind brushing against the cabin walls. He rarely spoke about the past. When he did, his stories were never about wars or adventures like other grandfathers told. Instead, he spoke about the mountain, about respecting old places, about promises that should never be broken. There was one warning he repeated every single winter, without fail. If we happened to drive along the eastern road, he would lower the radio stair into the forest and say in a voice so calm it frightened me more than shouting ever could, "If you ever see the old shrine," he would pause for several seconds and keep driving. As a boy, I always asked why, every single time. His answer never changed. Some places were never built for visitors. Then he would fall silent again. No explanation, no story, no legend. Just those words hanging inside the warm car while snow drifted endlessly beyond the windows. Children have a remarkable talent for forgetting warnings. Adults have an even greater talent for believing they finally understand them. I was 35 years old when I returned to Alder Ridge after my grandfather's funeral. 15 years had passed since my last visit. The village looked smaller than I remembered. The church roof sagged beneath fresh snow. Several houses stood empty. The old bakery, where grandfather used to buy rye bread, had boarded up windows. Even the air felt different. Colder, not in temperature, in spirit. As I collected the cabin keys from the village solicitor, an elderly woman serving coffee behind the counter studied me for a long moment. "You look just like him," she said quietly. "My grandfather," she nodded. "He never stayed in that cabin after sunset." I frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman looked toward the frosted window instead of answering. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily through the fading afternoon light. After several seconds, she forced a small smile. "I suppose it doesn't matter anymore." She slid the old brass key across the counter. "Just make sure you're indoors before dark." Her words followed me long after I stepped outside. Not because of what she had said, but because of what she hadn't. By the time I left the village solicitor's office, the afternoon was already dying. In the mountains, winter daylight does not fade gently. It retreats. One moment the valley is silver, and still the next it is drowning in blue shadow, and every tree along the road begins to look like a figure standing with its back turned. I loaded my suitcase into the car and sat behind the wheel for a while without starting the engine. The brass key lay in my palm. It was heavier than I remembered. Grandfather had carried it on the same iron ring for as long as I had known him. As a child, I used to think it opened every secret in the world. The woodshed, the cellar, the locked cupboard where he kept old photographs, the cabin door that always welcomed me with warmth and firelight. Now it felt less like a key, more like a warning. I drove out of Alder Ridge just as the church bell struck 4. The village disappeared quickly behind the curtain of falling snow. Soon there were no houses, no lights, no signs of life at all. Only the narrow mountain road twisting between black pines and steep banks of frozen earth. My headlights carved 2 pale tunnels through the storm. Beyond them, the world did not exist. At first the drive felt familiar in small, painful flashes. A bend in the road where my father once lost control, and grandfather laughed for 10 minutes after pulling us free. A crooked pine shaped like a bent old woman. A frozen stream that ran beside the road before vanishing beneath a stone bridge. Then the memories ended. Everything after that belonged to the present, and the present was colder. The cabin appeared suddenly, just as it always had. A dark wooden shape at the edge of the forest, half buried beneath snow, with its steep roof sagging under white weight. The windows reflected my headlights like dull, blind eyes. No smoke rose from the chimney. No golden light waited behind the glass. For the first time in my life, grandfather's cabin looked abandoned. I parked beside the woodshed and turned off the engine. The silence that followed was immense. It pressed against the car windows. For a few seconds, I could not make myself move. Then I thought of grandfather sitting alone here through all those winters, listening to that same silence and shame push me out into the cold. Snow swallowed my boots as I carried my suitcase to the porch. The steps groaned beneath me. Above the door, the old horseshoe still hung upside down, rusted and useless. I unlocked the cabin. The door opened with a long, tired sigh. Inside, the air smelled of dust, old wood, and ashes. I stood in the doorway, unable to enter. Nothing had changed. That was the cruelest part. Grandfather's coat still hung beside the stove. His chessboard remained on the small table near the window, the pieces arranged mid-game as if he had only stepped away for a moment. A stack of books leaned beside his leather chair. His walking stick rested against the wall. All the evidence of a life. None of the life itself. I set my suitcase down and walked to the fireplace. There were ashes in it, gray and cold. Beside them lay a half-burned piece of paper curled at the edges. I almost ignored it. Then I saw a line of writing that had survived the flames. Not my handwriting, not my father's, grandfather's. I picked it up carefully. Only a few words remained. The shrine must stay forgotten. A slow unease moved through me. The old woman's voice returned in my mind. He never stayed in that cabin after sunset. I looked toward the window. Outside, the forest stood close and black beneath the falling snow. For the first time, I noticed something strange. There were no animal tracks around the cabin. No deer, no fox, no birds, nothing. The snow surrounding the house was perfectly untouched, except for one set of footprints leading from the tree line to the porch. I stared at them through the frosted glass, my breath catching in my throat. They were deep, fresh, human. They came all the way to the front steps, but they did not lead away. Behind me, somewhere inside the cabin, a floorboard creaked, slowly, deliberately, as if someone had shifted their weight in the room above. For several seconds, I could not breathe. The cabin held still around me, the way a living thing holds still when it knows it has been noticed. My fingers tightened around the half-burned paper until the brittle edge cracked softly between them. Above me, another floorboard creaked. Slow, heavy, then silence. I told myself it was the old timber settling in the cold. Houses did that, cabins especially. Wood remembered every winter it had survived, and sometimes it complained when the frost returned. But that explanation did not survive the third sound. A faint scrape, directly over my head. Something moving across the bedroom floor. I backed away from the fireplace and reached blindly for the iron poker beside the stove. Its handle was cold enough to burn my palm. I stood there in my grandfather's cabin, a grown man of 35, holding a rusted poker like a frightened child while snow pressed against the windows and the forest watched from outside. "Hello," I called. My voice sounded wrong, too small for the room. No answer came. The ceiling boards remained silent. I waited, listening to my own heartbeat. Then, after what felt like a full minute, something knocked softly from upstairs. Once, twice, 3 times. Not random, not the wind. A polite little rhythm, as if someone were asking permission to come down. I should have left then. I know that now. I should have dropped the key, walked back to the car and driven to Alder Ridge before the road disappeared beneath the storm. I should have listened to the solicitor's old woman. I should have remembered every warning my grandfather had ever given me. Instead, I climbed the stairs. Each step groaned beneath my weight. The air grew colder halfway up, so sharply cold that my breath appeared in front of me. At the top of the staircase, a narrow hallway stretched toward the bedroom where I had slept as a boy. The door stood open. Darkness waited inside. I raised the poker. Is someone there? Nothing. I stepped into the room. It was empty. The bed was covered with a white sheet. The old wardrobe stood against the wall. A cracked mirror reflected the doorway behind me. Snow tapped lightly against the small window, soft as fingernails. No footprints. No stranger. No explanation. Then I saw the window. It was open. Only a few centimeters, but enough to let snow drift across the sill and gather in a thin white line on the floor. I crossed the room and pushed it shut. As I did, I looked down. The cabin roof sloped below the window. A perfect layer of snow covered it. Untouched. No tracks, no marks, no sign that anyone had climbed in. I closed the latch with trembling hands. That was when the mirror behind me whispered. Not a voice exactly, more like breath-forming words through old glass. Not yours. I spun around so violently my shoulder struck the wall. The room was empty. The mirror reflected only me, pale, wide-eyed, ridiculous, with the iron poker shaking in my hand. But written across the cloudy surface, as if traced by an invisible finger from the other side, were 2 words. Go back. The letters faded almost as soon as I saw them sinking into the silvered glass like blood into water. I went downstairs, grabbed my coat, and nearly ran out of the cabin. The cold struck me like a punishment. Outside, the footprints were still there. They came from the tree line, crossed the clean snow, climbed the porch steps, and stopped at the front door. I lifted my torch and followed them backward with the beam. They led into the forest, not toward the road, not toward the village, into the black pines behind the cabin. For some reason I cannot defend, I followed. Perhaps grief had made me reckless. Perhaps the half-burned paper in my pocket had opened some door in my mind that common sense could no longer close. Or perhaps deep down I had come back to Alder Ridge, not only to bury my grandfather, but to understand the fear he had carried all his life. The snow was deep beyond the cabin, nearly to my knees in places. Branches sagged beneath white weight. The world had narrowed to the small circle of my torch, the sound of my breathing, and those impossible footprints leading ahead of me. After 10 minutes, the cabin lights had vanished behind the trees. After 20, I no longer knew which direction the road lay. Still, the footprints continued. They were not like normal tracks. They were too deep, pressed hard into the snow, as if made by someone immensely heavy. Yet there was no drag, no stumble, no sign of hesitation. Whoever had made them had walked with calm purpose through the winter darkness. Then the trees began to thin. I stopped. Ahead, half hidden beneath snow and tangled branches, stood a stone archway. My torch trembled over it. 2 ancient pillars leaned inward, joined at the top by a cracked slab of gray stone. Moss and ice clung to its surface. Symbols had been carved into the rock, worn almost smooth by time. Beyond the arch, the land dipped into a narrow path lined with old stone lanterns, each buried to the waist in snow. I knew it before I admitted it to myself. The shrine, the place my grandfather had warned me about since childhood. If you ever see the old shrine, keep driving. I stood at the edge of the path with snow filling my boots and my breath shaking in the dark, and for the first time I understood the cruelty of certain warnings. They protect you only if you never learn what they mean. A sound came from beyond the arch. Faint, metallic, a small bell stirred by no wind. I should have turned back. Instead, I stepped through. The air changed immediately. The forest sounds disappeared. No creaking branches, no falling snow, no distant wind moving through the pines. The silence beyond the arch was complete, ancient, and suffocating. My torchlight found stone figures on either side of the path. Not saints, not angels, Not anything I had seen in churches or cemeteries. They were kneeling shapes, faceless beneath hoods of snow, their hands clasped as if in prayer. Each one faced the path, not the shrine ahead, as though they had been waiting for visitors. I walked between them with my heart hammering in my throat. At the end of the path stood what remained of the shrine. It had once been beautiful. Even ruined, I could see that. A small wooden structure with a steep roof, delicate carvings, and a bell hanging from a blackened beam. But time had broken it open. The roof sagged. One wall had collapsed. Snow lay thick over the threshold. In front of the shrine was a dry well. Its stones were dark, almost black, and the snow around it had melted into a perfect circle. Heat rose from it. I could see the vapor drifting upward. Warmth in the middle of a frozen forest. My mind tried to reject what my body already felt. I approached the well. From somewhere below came a sound, a dull, distant thump, then another, slow, rhythmic, like a drum being struck deep under the mountain. The moment I heard it, something inside my coat grew hot. I reached into the pocket and pulled out the half-burned paper. Only now there were more words on it. Words that had not been there before. The shrine must stay forgotten. The debt must stay buried. The keeper must never take what was offered. Beneath the final line in my grandfather's handwriting was my name. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Then the bell above the shrine rang once. The sound moved through the clearing like a blade. From inside the ruined shrine, something shifted. Wood creaked. Snow slid from the roof. And in the darkness, beyond the broken doorway, a figure stood up. Not quickly. Not suddenly. Slowly. As if it had been kneeling there for a very long time. I backed away from the well. The figure stepped forward. I could not see its face. Only the outline of a person wrapped in old dark cloth, taller than any man should be, with something pale hanging from one hand. A string of coins. They clinked together softly. The drumbeat below the earth grew louder. I turned and ran. I do not remember the path back through the stone figures. I remember only snow tearing at my legs, branches whipping my face, and that soft clinking sound following behind me. Not fast. Never fast. Always just close enough to hear. By the time I reached the archway, I was sobbing for breath. I stumbled through it and fell hard into the snow on the other side. The forest sounds returned all at once. Wind, trees, my own ragged breathing. Behind me, the archway stood empty. No shrine path, no lanterns, no kneeling statues, only dense pines and untouched snow. I staggered back toward the cabin, guided more by panic than memory. When its dark shape finally appeared between the trees, relief nearly broke me. Then I saw the porch. The front door was open. Warm light spilled onto the snow, and standing in that light was my grandfather, or something, wearing the memory of him. He stood motionless in his old brown coat, one hand resting on his walking stick, his face hidden beneath the shadow of his hat. I could not move. The thing raised its head. My grandfather's voice came from its mouth. Soft, sad, almost loving. You should not have come back before dark. Then every light in the cabin went out. Darkness swallowed the cabin whole. For one impossible moment, I stood frozen in the snow, staring at the place where my grandfather had been. The porch was empty now. The doorway was only a black rectangle cut into the face of the house. No light, no movement, no old man leaning on his walking stick. Only the storm. Only the trees. Only my own breath tearing itself apart in my chest. I wanted to run to the car, but the keys were inside the cabin. My phone had no signal, and even if it had, I could not imagine calling anyone in Alder Ridge and explaining that my dead grandfather had just warned me from the porch. So I forced myself forward. The snow creaked beneath my boots. Every step toward the open door felt like stepping into the mouth of something patient and ancient. "Grandfather," I called. The word sounded childish the moment it left me. No answer came. I crossed the porch and entered the cabin. Inside the cold was worse than outside. Not natural cold. Not the honest cold of winter air and mountain wind. This was a buried cold, a cellar cold, the kind that rises from stone rooms where sunlight has never reached. I found my torch on the floor near the fireplace. Its beam flickered when I turned it on, then steadied cutting through the dark. The living room had changed. Grandfather's coat no longer hung beside the stove. His chessboard had been disturbed. The pieces were scattered across the table, all except the Black King, which stood alone in the center of the board. Beside it lay another scrap of paper. I knew before touching it that it belonged to him. The handwriting was unmistakable. My hand shook as I unfolded it. "If you found the shrine, then I failed you." I sat down slowly in grandfather's leather chair. The paper continued. "Our family was never meant to own this land. We were meant to guard it. Your great-grandfather guarded it before me, and his mother before him. The shrine is not holy. It is a lock. The coins are not offerings. They are weights. Every one of them keeps something beneath the mountain asleep." I read the lines 3 times before they became real. The drumbeat under the earth returned in my memory. Slow, patient, hungry. At the bottom of the note was one final sentence. "If one coin is taken, the keeper must return it before dawn." My mouth went dry. "I didn't take anything," I whispered. But even as I said it, I remembered the figure in the ruined shrine, the string of coins hanging from its pale hand, the clinking sound following me through the forest. Then I remembered the half-burned paper growing hot inside my coat. I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around something small, round, and warm. I pulled it out. A coin lay in my palm. Old, blackened, heavy. There was a square hole cut through its center, and around the edge were symbols I could not read. It smelled faintly of smoke and wet earth. I had never picked it up. I knew I had never picked it up. But it was there, and somewhere beneath the cabin, or beneath the mountain itself, the dull sound of a drum began again. This time I did not mistake it for memory. The floorboards trembled beneath my boots. Once, twice, a slow pulse moving through the wood. I stood clutching the coin and ran to the front door. It slammed shut before I reached it. The force of it shook the walls. I grabbed the handle. It would not move. Behind me from upstairs came the sound of footsteps. Not one person. Several. Slowly descending. Step. 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 I turned my torch toward the staircase. Nothing appeared at first. Then a hand slid around the banister. Long. Gray. Wrong. I did not wait to see the rest. I threw myself toward the kitchen, found the back door, and kicked it open with such force that pain shot up my leg. Snow rushed in. I stumbled outside, fell to my knees, then dragged myself upright and ran toward the woods, toward the shrine. Every instinct screamed against it, but grandfather's words burned brighter than fear. The coin must be returned before dawn. The forest seemed different now. The trees stood closer together. Branches clawed at my coat as if trying to hold me back. The snow no longer looked pure. In the torchlight, it appeared faintly gray like ash scattered over the world. Behind me, the cabin door opened. I heard it. Then came the walking stick. Tap, tap, tap. Grandfather's voice drifted through the trees. "Don't stop." I nearly sobbed when I heard him. This time I knew it was truly him, not the thing from the porch, not the thing wearing his memory. Some part of him remained here, trapped in the duty he had carried until death. "I'm sorry," I gasped into the storm. The wind took the words away. The stone archway appeared where it had not been moments before, rising from the snow like the bones of a buried cathedral. I passed through it. Again the forest fell silent. Again the path of stone lanterns waited. But now the kneeling statues had changed. Their heads were raised. Faceless hoods turned toward me as I ran between them. The shrine bell rang once. Then again. Then again. A warning. A welcome. The ruined shrine stood ahead, its broken doorway open like a wound. The dry well steamed in front of it, and from below came the drumbeat louder than before. I approached the well with the coin burning in my fist. Where I whispered. The bell rang. At the base of the shrine, half buried beneath snow, I saw a stone bowl filled with hundreds of old coins. Offerings. Weights. Locks. I stumbled toward it and dropped the coin in. The moment it struck the others, the entire clearing went still. The drumbeat stopped. The steam vanished. The bell ceased moving. For one fragile second, I believed I had done it. Then, something inside the shrine laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, softly, almost with pity. The dark figure stepped into the doorway. It was taller than before, wrapped in strips of rotting cloth that moved, though there was no wind. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but I felt its attention settle on me like a hand around my throat. From behind me came the tap of a walking stick. I turned. My grandfather stood beneath the archway. He looked as he had when I was young, stern, tired, and possibly sad. Snow passed through him as if he were made of breath. You return the coin, he said. Then it's over. He did not answer quickly. That silence broke something inside me. It's over, isn't it? Grandfather looked past me toward the shrine. No, he said. Now it remembers you. The figure in the doorway lowered its head. The bell began to swing again. Grandfather stepped closer. I kept it forgotten as long as I could. Your father refused the duty. I hoped you would never come back. What duty? But I already knew. The look in his eyes told me everything. Keeper. The words sat between us older than love, heavier than blood. I don't want this, I said. No one ever does. The clearing shook. Snow slipped from the shrine roof. The stone statues bowed their heads again as if the ceremony had been completed. Grandfather placed one transparent hand against my chest. For a moment, warmth returned to the world. I am sorry, he whispered. Then he was gone. I woke at dawn on the cabin floor. The fire was burning in the hearth. My clothes were dry. The front door was locked from the inside. On the table, the chess pieces had been arranged neatly for a new game. But every winter, when the first snow falls, I dream of the shrine. I dream of the bell. I dream of coins shifting in the dark beneath the mountain. And last December, an envelope arrived at my apartment with no stamp and no return address. Inside was the old brass key, the one I had left behind. Wrapped around it was a strip of paper in my grandfather's handwriting. The road is open again. I have not slept properly since, because now, when the snow falls against my window at night, I sometimes hear a walking stick tapping in the hallway outside my door. Tap, 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 and beneath it, very far away, I hear a drum.